Hey, pal. You ready? Can you pick me up at 6:30?
I'm here.
Too late.
I'll go for 5 minutes. Move it. You're killing me. You know what, Dad? I'm good.
It may be quite a while before he's ready, but our Subaru Legacy will be waiting for him.
It's not just a sedan, it's a Subaru.
University Subaru.
The wise choice!
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Wednesday, February 3rd. I've got a really interesting guy with us today. Jack Schultz, who is director of the Bond Life Science Center. It is always a pleasure to have you on Radio Friends.
Well, thanks, Paul. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Now, last time you were here, we were talking about CRISPR, right?
Yeah.
If people did not see that, just real quick, explain what that is.
CRISPR is a new way to change genes, to edit them, so you can snip them apart, add something to them, put them back together again, and they do new things.
Yeah, and you know, it was a couple of days after we did this segment, I read a big story about it in USA Today.
Well, it offers tremendous possibilities for curing diseases and all sorts of forward-looking things.
Yeah, but today, Jack came in and he said, I want to talk about why scientists aren't understood, why lay people in the community just don't understand scientists.
Yeah. And to be unfair to scientists, a lot of times they blame the public, for not getting it. It's really unfortunate. But in the study of this, and now there is a science of science communication, where people are actually studying why science is difficult to get across and how to do a better job. The blaming the audience idea is called the deficit model, where you assume that you're working with people who, I don't know.
Or scientists.
Well, the audience is not too clever. The scientists are a little egotistical. But the problem with the whole thing is that scientists aren't trained in psychology or sociology. They're trained in whatever their science is. I'm a biologist, for example. And when I started to think about this some years ago, I thought, well, somebody must understand how to get a message across. For example, people sell cars. I mean, people in advertising know how to sell things, right? Uh-huh. They know how to convince you of things. They know how to explain things to you so you will do what they would like, okay? Scientists don't seem to know how to do that. And it's because they don't read other people's literatures. They study their own thing, and they don't study other things. Let's do a little experiment here to illustrate a point. I'm going to give you a list of words that describe an animal, and at the end I want you to tell me what kind of animal it is, okay?
Okay.
All right, it's furry, warm-blooded, has a fairly long tail most of the time, has sharp teeth, originally was a predator, but now it's domesticated, lives with us in our homes, and sometimes bites.
A dog.
Oh, okay.
A dog.
All right. You could have said a cat.
I could have said a cat, too. In fact, while you were giving those, I thought it's either a dog or a cat.
Right, but you have a dog, right?
Right. Yeah, I have a cat, too.
Yeah. Oh, do you?
I have cats also.
All right. You were going to answer that question based on the way you think about those words and the way they add up for you, okay? That mental model is something that everybody has of almost everything. So your audience has a mental model of what a radio show is like. They almost certainly have a mental model of you, particularly if they've only heard you on the radio. They are probably imagining what you must look like just on the basis of your sound, and they may even guess at personality characteristics. The point that makes for communicating about science is if I'm going to try to talk to somebody about science, I'm not dealing with a blank slate there. I'm dealing with a person who has sometimes quite fixed ideas about things. Mm-hmm. So if I were going to talk about the biology of a dog or a cat and assumed that you thought cat when I used those words, I would be making a terrible mistake.
Right.
And I shouldn't expect you to understand what I'm saying. All right?
Makes sense.
Okay. That's a fundamental sort of law or rule of psychology. The formation of mental images and mental models that people use all the time to interpret their world is something that psychologists have known about forever.
So is the scientific community trying now to better communicate with us, with the lay people?
Absolutely. For some Big reasons and some personal reasons. The big reasons are, and you've asked me about this before, what about climate change? What are we doing about that? Is it really a problem? Do we understand it? Well, most scientists think they do understand it and it needs to be dealt with. But they're having trouble convincing the public and policymakers of that. And they find that very frustrating. Mm-hmm. But the reason they're frustrated is they seem to think that the information and what they say will speak for themselves. Scientists like to say, let the data speak for themselves.
Right. But here, when you talk about climate change, yes, if you read the data, it's going to speak for itself. Right. But you've got other people, a lot of politicians, who do not want to admit to climate change, so they are kind of manipulating that data.
Well,
I like one thing when they come out and say, "Well, I'm not a scientist. I don't understand."
Yeah, I know exactly right. Yeah, well, and that's a good reason for scientists to communicate better. I mean, you really don't want to be in the position of being the only expert so that everybody else can say that. I mean, you'd like others to share your understanding of it. Another reason this is important to scientists is that for the reasons you just mentioned, Congress and others are scrutinizing research that we're doing very carefully, particularly from the point of view of whether it pays off in some particular way. So a scientist that cannot communicate clearly not only to the public but to legislators is going to be in real trouble getting funding in the future. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a national movement to educate scientists about communicating with people, real people.
Do you think at one point that the majority of people will say, yes, we do have climate change taking place in the world? I think
it's possible, and I pin my hopes to explaining it better and getting better understanding. I wouldn't guarantee it. Another psychological problem here is that people act on the basis of their immediate interests this year.
And not 50 years down the road.
Right.
Now, as a scientist, can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. Do you feel that we have gone beyond the tipping point with climate change, or is there a possibility that we can still improve?
Well, I'm a scientist, but I'm not that kind of scientist. No, I'm not sure we're past the tipping point, although experts in the area are starting to worry about it. I suspect that we have done some things that will never change, we'll never be able to bring back. But that doesn't mean that we've blown the whole show and we can't recover some of the goodness of life that we've had.
Right. All right. We're out of time. Jack Schultz, always it's a pleasure having you here. If people want more information, they can contact you at the Bond Life Science Center or go to the website.
That's right. And in fact, I'll be discussing this same issue at Saturday Morning Science on February 13th in the Bond Life Sciences Center.
Okay, February 13th.
10:30 in the morning. That's a Saturday Morning Science.
And it's free, open to the public?
Free, open to the public.
All right. Jack Schultz, thank you so much for coming by.
It was
Always
a
pleasure having you here. Tomorrow we have retired professor, University of Missouri, Mel Zelenik with us. Our program directed by Travis McMillen. Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio is Pat Akers from KBIA. Our floor director is Adam Teater. And our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. Drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you'd like to hear. pepperpmissouri.edu.